Hey everyone, Laurel here, Minnesota Zone 5A. I'm just going to do a little garden tour and talk about some of the mistakes I've made in the garden in the past and some things I've done right. Maybe some of the things I learned as well. The containers are doing really well. We had, I don't know, a week and a half, 2 weeks of heat wave, high humidity in particular, which is miserable, as we all know. And today is kind of the last day of the humidity. It cooled down a little bit. And then we're going to have really cool rain tomorrow, Monday, and then back to lower than average, cooler than average temperatures, which I am very much looking forward to. So anyway, container gardening. I started out, 12, 13, maybe 15 years ago, something like that, container gardening. I had an apartment with a little patio. Actually, it was a good sized balcony, decent sized balcony. Started out with a bunch of pots that were hand-me-downs and just started planting. Best way to learn is just to do it, just start planting. I had no idea what the light conditions really were like, etc. Learned a lot just from planting different things. What I used to do, however, is overstuff my containers. I overfilled them hugely back in the past. And it's funny because I had much smaller containers back then. Like this, to me, back in that time I would have considered that a big container, and I probably would have put 4 things in there. Now I have 2. I've even gotten away with just doing 1 thing in there, depending on what it is. And that's fine. You can always do that. I think somebody commented on a previous video that we have such a short growing season here that you might as well just fill them up right from the start and enjoy the full color. But that's expensive, or it can be. So I have learned not to overfill things and hold back a little bit from what I want to do, even though I see bare soil early on and I want to put more plants in there. I know that they are going to fill in fast. Each of these containers only has 3 plants in it, and they are quite large containers. So pruning, also a must. I don't know what's going on. This is the Supertunia Saffron Finch. I have 2 of them in here, and this one just, the blooms died off, and it's looking pretty icky, so I don't know what happened there. I didn't know that you should prune things. Sweet potato vines I always did because I used to plant the old versions. Now I only plant the Proven Winners varieties. Excuse me, because they stay a lot more contained and tidy on their own without needing pruning. But the older classic varieties of sweet potato vine really take over, and they vine everywhere. So unless you left plenty of space for that to happen, you are going to have to prune things. Same thing, petunias and calibrachoa in particular need frequent prunings or trimmings throughout the season. I just go through, and all the long ends, the long legs, I'll go underneath. I'll cut off all the long legs, anything that looks sickly, and just lop the blooms right off. Your plants will thank you for it, and you'll have a lot more blooms later on. And then they don't get scraggly looking and bare in the middle. So it's kind of an art. There's an art to it. I mean, you don't have to be particularly discriminate in where you make those cuts, but I guess knowing when to do it can be challenging. So now things do a lot better now that oh, there's a bee, very curious about my camera. I don't know if that was on camera or not. I forgot what I was saying about pruning. Same thing, pinching back, coleus. I never used to pinch them because it's like you want them to get big and beautiful fast, but then if you don't stay up on pinching, they bloom and they get leggy or scraggly looking. So it will benefit you in the end, even though it's hard to cut off beautiful blooms from your petunias. They will look much better in the long run and stay fuller all summer. Just like coleus here, this one's starting to put up blooms, which is fine. It doesn't harm the plant. I go down to the next junction and pinch. Those 2 leaves within a week are going to be a full nother branch and look like this. So and it'll keep your plant much fuller and in a better shape. So that's something that I have learned through making those mistakes in the past, and something that I do right now for the most part. Watering also, when I was in my apartment balcony, I didn't have access to hook up a hose. I didn't have the kind of sink where you could like put that hose connection on your kitchen sink and run it out there. I had nothing. I just had watering cans that I would fill up in my bathtub spigot because it filled the cans a lot faster. I think I had 2 3-gallon cans or 2 2-gallon cans. And it was tough keeping things watered. And like I said, that size pot I used to think was huge. And so I would pack 4 plants into there. And by midsummer, the roots were just filling up the pot and I needed water constantly. So it was really hard to keep up on that. So that's, I guess, part of the mistakes I've made by overstuffing pots. If you have a lot more soil volume, it's a heck of a lot easier to keep things watered. And your plants stay a lot healthier. They don't go through those sort of daily periods of stress in between watering. So that can really stunt their growth. So now I've kind of got it locked down. I've spent time collecting large pots on clearance at the end of the season over the years. And I have big pots. I can't even lift them hardly when they're open. You know, I could lift them up onto a cart, but that's about it. So bigger pots, the better when it comes to growing annuals in containers. And their annuals are very vigorous, so they do need the space. I love this spicy lizard. I think the Proven Winners one I'm thinking that's kind of like it is something like spilled wine or something with a wine splatter that it reminds me of. Like a white tablecloth that got splattered with red wine. This, that was just a Menards purchase, but then I'm glad I finally got this white one with the red veins. That one's Fiesta, and I love how it looks with that Tradescantia. I think that's called Rainbow, Pink Rain, no, I forget. Pink Zebra Tradescantia. I put the tag in there, but now it's all overgrown, or grown over, rather. So that's a container garden. I did prune all these Calibrachoa back. This one I could probably do a little bit. You just go under, that bumblebee's down there now, under the bottom side and prune off the legs. Same thing, this container. These are extremely vigorous plants. So this is a Supertunia Royal Magenta and a Superbena Cherry Burst. And they are growing legs too. You have to check behind because they'll shoot off behind and grow way in the back. And then they start getting leggy in the front. When they do that, they start getting bare looking. So I'll untangle them. You know, like this one was growing all in here, choking out this other Superbena as well. So I untangled it and cut off those. Even though it was blooming, I cut off those stems because it's going to do both containers a lot of good. They'll be better off for it. Easy access to water too, man, that makes a difference. Once I kind of got my setup, I went through everything in my last video, how I set up all my hoses and my watering. That made life so much easier. But watering takes a lot of time. This year we've had a very, very wet year. So it's been a break from watering, which has been really nice. Challenging in other ways, but really nice as far as watering containers. I've also in the past made the mistake of thinking that even when things are full like this, that when you get some rain, they are going to be well watered, and that is not the case. Rain can't get into something that's this thickly planted. I mean, maybe a little bit, but not deep enough to really give it a good saturating watering. So even when it rains, I'm out here watering. The other thing I never used to do really until I think I moved here. I don't remember if I ever did it in my apartment. I doubt it. Regular fertilizer, just a water-soluble fertilizer. I was planted with a slow-release fertilizer. I've used different brands. But hitting everything regularly, now I do it pretty much once a week. Every now and then I miss a week, but most of the summer it's pretty faithfully once a week, hitting it with water-soluble fertilizer, and if you have a lot of petunias, and especially calibrachoa, or if you live in a place with high alkaline water, using that chelated iron. Man, that made a difference in how my annuals performed throughout the season. So it's all looking good. Also, one thing, I don't know if it's a mistake per se, as I think a lack of widespread knowledge in a way. You don't hear a whole lot about it as a new gardener, I don't think, at least I didn't, is that shrubs, perennials, they often, if they're in a spot where they're happy, they're going to get bigger than what the plant tag says. That's not true across the board. If you've got something that's dealing with less than ideal conditions, it might stay smaller, it might struggle, or it might be the same size. But I think the plant tags often measure a plant at maybe 5 to 10 years of maturity. Well, things don't just stop growing. So like this is a tiny wine 9 bark, which I think the tag states it's about 3 to 4 feet tall and wide. And this, I'm 5'10", and these upper branches come up to my head. I mean, they're as tall as I am. Also, overcrowding. That's another thing to know. Overestimate the size that the plant is going to get. These phlox have been overcrowded now for a number of years, and I transplanted one before I gave it to my neighbor. These, I'm almost ready to dig these out. I'm so close to getting a spot where I can put them in the back of the garden. And they get powdery mildew so bad every year, but give stuff extra space. Leave room if you're going to need to move around behind the plant to get at the fence or whatever. Leave extra space. Overestimate. This dogwood, I've talked about this many times. It said, I think it was 4 to 5 feet tall and wide. And this thing is way over my head. So I'm going to be pruning that back really hard next year. It's kind of overgrown. I pruned it. I gave it a good prune this year. I should have done more. But dogwoods are native to a lot of the US, a lot of North America. So plants that tend to be native, or they're cultivars of native in your area, if you're planting them, they're probably going to get bigger than what the tag says. They're probably going to do well, and they're going to be more aggressive. So just plan for that. Leave extra space. I'm glad I did with that one. I can still get behind, well, maybe not right now, but when it's not full of leaves, I can still get behind there and get in there and prune it back. So those are mistakes I have made before as well. Also trying to fight, I don't know what you want to say, in nature, or this little heuchera, that red one that's down there, that little teeny one, is called Fire Alarm. Beautiful red and orange kind of coloring, but really bright red. And when I planned out this space, I had planted 5 of them in that area to be my red pop. And a bunch of them died the first year, so I went back with the plant warranty and replaced them, thinking it was a hard winter. Well, all but one of them died the next year, so I didn't go back and get more. I just gave up on them. I didn't replace anymore. So don't fight what nature is telling you. It's either that variety or maybe a combination of that variety, and the location is just not meant to be. So don't keep fighting. So I planted these ladies' mantle instead, and they do great here. And then this lamb's ear is a ground cover as well, which I love. And I already have my red pop of color in the 9 bark, so works out well. This honeysuckle, the aphids are growing. I have not I've had a chance, but I've been too tired those nights after I'm done working in the garden to really spray it down. So I need to hit it with the hose really hard and knock a bunch of them off. And then this evening, I should just prepare the neem oil sprayer right now and really spray it hard with neem oil. Also, one mistake that this one barely has enough space. I left enough room, I think, hopefully, between these sedum. Instinct was to plant them much closer, but the tag said, I don't remember what it said, how wide they get, and I planted them that wide, and I'm glad I did because they actually have some room to breathe. But leaving room to get around, leaving big enough walkways, something that I have not done on occasion. When I planted up this side garden, and this whole yard, when we moved in it was October 2017, it was all just grass. There were no plantings back here at all, other than the 2 spruce trees. So all of this garden I have dug out from just the grass. There was this overgrown mulberry tree in the corner where that dogwood is that was encroaching on both my house and the neighbor's house. And so he had a buddy come over one day and they cut that down. And then between my mom and I, we dug out the massive root system. Mulberry have enormous roots out of that corner. And that was when I could start planting over here. But I sat on digging by hand all the sod, all the grass, digging it out of here, knocking the topsoil off. And I was so anxious to plant things. I had gotten a bunch of perennials on sale in preparation for that. I was so anxious to plant over here. And I wish I had, over the past few years, I've sort of expanded it about a foot wider than it used to be. And now I'm kind of like, you can see all the stuff that grows through. And normally it doesn't grow. I've trimmed it back a couple times this summer, but this year we've gotten so much rain that I just can't keep up with it. It's so much. And I can't get in there. I just reach over with my pruners or my lopper and cut back as much as I can. But holy cow. And so now it's like I wish I had more space in between the perennials and the fence, because it makes it kind of tricky to get in there too. And I'm crawling around and getting all scratched up by stuff. So again, leave enough space to get around things, to pull out a weed if you're going to need to get in there and pull out a weed or whatever. Bulbo hydrangeas looking good. I haven't had to sprinkle this area this year, which is so nice. Normally this area is super dry because those arborvitae are so thirsty, such thirsty plants. But I talked about this before, but I transplanted these bulbos. They were kind of back more where those hostas are. And I had 2 of them. They just didn't get enough sun. And so as I've expanded this garden bed, I bumped them out and then added a 3rd one, which is why that one's smaller, because it's younger. But yeah, so this is their first year kind of in this spot, and they're definitely getting a lot more sun. So I'm pleased with that. Let's see. I really need to start working on here. Hoping when my sister comes to visit, we can do a little digging out of some of this grass. It's kind of tough this year, though. It's hard to dig out sod when it's really dry because the ground gets so hard, but also when it's really saturated, all the dirt just sticks together. So anyway, and that's a lot of labor too, so holy crap. Some mistakes that I made over here starting out this area. So behind the garage, this area has really evolved, and it's still kind of, well, now I'm pulling it together a little bit more, I think. When I started out, it was like, well, I just want an area just to plant fun stuff, just fly by the seat of my pants, kind of do what I felt like. So I did. But I didn't plan out sort of the structural pieces to it, like the shrubs, the backdrop that you need kind of in a garden. And I had a spirea. And again, this is a good way to learn your soil conditions, is just plant stuff. And I bought a lot of stuff on clearance, so I didn't lose a whole lot. But I planted a spirea back here, Tor birchleaf spirea, whose max height was 4 feet. I don't know why I was kind of afraid to plant anything that got more than like 5 feet tall anywhere in the garden. It just seemed so humongous and I didn't want things to take over. But it was just way too short for back there. Which I realized as I expanded this area. And it also got really bad fungal disease, so I had to pull that out. Now I have things that get a little bit more appropriate sized. Although, holy crap, look at this little lime hydrangea. That thing is so tall. I think they say they get up to 6 feet. So I suppose it's about the height they say they're going to get. But man, that is the tallest it has ever been. I've also just learned through planting that this area retains the most moisture of anywhere in the garden, which I wouldn't expect because I'm on a slope. You know, the yard kind of slopes down towards the back fence from the garage. So I wouldn't expect this to be the highest moisture area, but it is. So knowing that, after a couple years of experience, I planted this hibiscus. It was this is its 3rd year in the ground, maybe. This is the Holy Grail hibiscus for proven winners. So pretty. Got my first bloom open and a whole lot more coming. But yeah, these grasses are good height. They're probably about 6 feet, maybe a little bit taller. I need to get a new trellis that goes all the way up for that clematis that's now kind of hiding behind the grass over there. And I also, okay, let me back out of here without stepping on any of my plants. There we go. This is an azalea. It's called Rosy Lights, and that should get about 6 feet tall. I may have made the mistake of planting it too close to the hibiscus, even though I stepped out the bottom. Although I don't know, azalea they're not real dense shrubs, you know, they stay kind of a little bit more open. This one looks goofy because in the next couple of years I'll probably have to prune off those top ones, but anyway. And these are cosmos that self-seeded. So I transplanted a few. I don't know what variety they are. They haven't bloomed yet, which makes me think they're one of the mixes that bloomed super late. Can't recall now. And these dahlias should be much, much taller. But this area is so waterlogged this year that they are just struggling. You can see they're all yellow. These are all tall varieties. This is the only one that started to turn green. The rest of them just stayed super yellow. So I've been dotting, even though if the dahlias were doing well, there wouldn't be room for all of these extra things in here, but I've been taking some of my extra seedlings and just throwing them in so at least I have something. This amaranth is really cool. I think it's called Coral Fountain. And I should probably trim this off so that the plant gets bigger and bushier, but they just look so darn cool. And I just have this cage here. This is a zinnia. These are the Sahara salmon. Both of these, but I don't want to accidentally step on it or hit it with the hose. So updates over here too. And I guess some things I've learned in my veggie garden. Again, leave enough space to get through. These are the 2 Vico garden beds. I have 2 of the 6-in-1, which I have set up in the main configure, like the classic configuration, which is 3.5 by 5.5 feet, I think, are the dimensions. I took forever to decide what size. I went through a bunch of different configurations. I took measurements. It's really hard for me to know without seeing it in the space. And I wanted to take measurements while I had vegetables growing in my old beds, like fully mature vegetables, so I could see really how much space I needed in order to give the plants room. And I went back and forth. I could have fit another bed in there. I was thinking about doing like one of the long skinny ones. But I thought, no, I want to be able to get through. I want enough space to get a garden cart through and around this size. If I'm hauling compost and mulch and leaves and stuff, especially when the plants are big, I want room to get through. I don't want to have to carry all of that. And then it's like, Laurel, remember, things get big. Look how huge the zucchini is hanging over. Broccoli, carrots even, they all do the same thing. They get large. These beans, these are bush beans that are hanging over. So I wanted room for plants to get large and still be able to get around, because trying to squeeze yourself in to harvest stuff, especially when it's hot out, is no fun. And I still wanted to have a container with flowers in the middle too. So I just went with 2 beds for now, with a plan to add more. I think I'm going to get some of the round berry beds. One thing I've learned too, this berry patch is doing amazing, but I do not want to harvest berries on my hands and knees and dig through a huge patch to do it. So I'm going to get a couple berry beds to put in here. I've been, again, measuring and remeasuring this, this area, this table with the potato bag growing on it. I placed that there purposefully because it's about the width of the 30-inch bed. There's also a 42-inch round bed. And so that's been kind of my experiment to figure out, like, how much space do I need? Is that going to be too big, too small? So that's kind of my trial right now. Also, look at all my strawberries. It's funny, these are seascape berries. So ready to pick most of these. Oh, yeah. This variety is called Seascape. I first started with just like 5 little starts that I got at the plant sale in the spring a few years ago. In just a little container, thinking, oh, they'll do fine. Well, they don't do great long term in a container. They were fine. But I didn't get more than a little handful of berries over the season. But of course, they send out runners and run like crazy, as strawberries do. So that's how this berry patch developed. And I kind of let it go with the intent that I would one day get raised beds to put them in and just be able to dig these up and transplant. Of course, not all of them, but I've given a number away at work too and to friends. So, but the seascape berries, they were really prolific early on in the season, like in June, when most strawberries fruit. But the berries were much smaller. This second round are large, and they do kind of lull. I mean, they are ever-bearing, and you get the second flush, but midsummer, there were hardly any berries. So just FYI. I did plant up, so I harvested my garlic that was down here. A little bit bigger bulbs on average than the stuff that I grew in the raised bed. But it was also in the ground for almost 2 weeks longer, so that could be why. But either way, I think that's a good testament to the fact I can either plant in the ground or the raised bed, whatever works best for that year. So that's good to know. But I've had these red acre cabbage that I started from seed in the spring. I've just been kind of up potting them with the plans to put them out here once I harvested the garlic. I don't know that they'll get a full head of cabbage, but they look pretty. We've got 2 Rockin' Play in the Blues salvia that I got. Lilydale Garden Center has 50% off their annual, so I picked up a load of stuff. So I got a couple of those. We've got these beautiful Americana dark red geranium here. And then this I found on sale. It's like $4. It's the new pink cashmere Superbena. I've just been curious to try it. I love Superbena, so I like to try the new styles. And I was intrigued by how like sturdy look how straight those are standing and how big that is. So that's after being all season in a little 4-inch plant can. So pretty impressive. I also have been collecting clearance annuals. I had about 4 trays, probably 4 trays worth from various places. This is the Calliope, I think it's called dark red. One of the Calliope red geranium, and there are 4 of them in there because they're pretty small. And then I picked up a whole bunch of marigolds. The Garden City tents had them 99, all their 4-packs are 99 cents. Also went to Lilydale and picked up a tray full. Theirs are like $1.25 for their 4-packs. So and they looked really good. So just a mix of different kinds here. Also my peppers, that's a good thing about this heat wave. Peppers are starting to finally grow. But I rearranged this whole place. I dug out a bunch of thistles. I'm sure they'll come back because their root system are so vigorous. But anyways, I like to do this. I've tried growing succession planting vegetables, and the only thing I've really been successful with that is like herbs and lettuce. Anything that needs a full growing season, by the time I clear out a space, it's too far into summer. I've never really successfully gotten another harvest out of them. Even short growing things like cabbage or pea pods, I don't know, I think it just cools down too fast and then they don't have the heat that they need to really take off and grow. Or maybe it's me, who knows. But I bought a bunch of clearance snapdragons that I just popped in here because it is not a good cucumber year for me. This was a new area of ground that I dug out. It had mulch on it and planters, but I took those away, dug out all the weedy grass that had come up. And I think if it were a dry year, things would surprisingly be doing better, but this soil needs some work. So my cucumbers really didn't germinate well. I sowed seeds twice, a lot of seeds, and I only had 2 come up, and even those 2 aren't looking great. So, but that's okay, I don't mind. Sometimes I forget that's a mistake I've made too. Overplanting vegetables or forgetting how much work it is to keep up with this stuff sometimes. When I'm picking a gallon bag of beans at a time and trying to cook with those, and I got shallots and peppers and everything else coming along. I've had broccoli, trying to cook with all that just for myself becomes overwhelming. So trying to keep up with making pickles, etc. So anyway, so it's kind of nice that, and then my squash also failed to germinate, so I went to plan B instead of resowing those seeds, and I'm happy about it. It's been a little bit easier this year, but I'm hoping if I just keep planting some annuals, and maybe I'll plant my garlic here next year, because that's what I did over here. That whole patch where it was kind of new ground last year, and that soil is much, much better than this is over here, so maybe I'll try that. Pea pods, I've pulled out a lot of these. I think the voles, like I said in the past, the voles are getting to the roots. So, oh well. This is Emerald Towers basil that I started from seed. I haven't even used any, and I'm just shocked that it's staying nice and tidy and not blooming. So I'm going to keep growing that because that's easy peasy. And then more snapdragons I grew from seed. And this is that monster dill. All the dill this year is self-seeded. I didn't start any, just from previous years. It self-seeds prolifically, but super easy to pull out. So, and where the pea pods died back, I planted more dwarf snapdragons. This is the Madame Butterfly Bronze mix, or seed, not mix, just Madame Butterfly Bronze that I started from seed. I've got more marigolds here. This is a combination of Fireball and Strawberry Blonde, which is my favorite marigold. This one over here is 3 of the Strawberry Blonde. We've had warm weather now, so they're more gold yellow. When it's cooler, they turn more orange and red shades. So just a really fun one. Beautiful, deep kind of copper reddish orange in the fall. But I like marigolds because they're super frost tolerant and they'll keep growing even when it's cold. And they were cheap. So over here I think I have 5 different Calibrachoa that were all on super clearance. A few super bells and then one unlabeled variety. And then this is the only shallot that wasn't ready. You want to wait until the neck's starting to get soft, so maybe it'll be... Okay, sorry about that. The battery died. Anyway, shallots and onions, same thing. When the neck gets squishy, usually when the whole thing will bend over, that's when they're ready to harvest. You don't want to leave them in too much longer or they may start to rot. So just waiting for that one, but I've got a little one of these purple lobularia, purple stream, and then another Calibrachoa that was clearance. And then I planted up this bed with both seedlings and clearance annuals. So I've got some lettuce. This was like the free variety that Baker Creek sent out with orders. So I have 3 of those. I don't really know when they're ready. That one's probably ready. They're probably ready right now. I don't know. And then I've got some Salanova mix here. I'm having trouble I don't usually have trouble with germination, but they're taking forever to germinate right now. Should probably bring them inside where it's cooler. It's probably been too warm out. This is French tarragon. That's perennial. That just stays in the pot all winter and comes back. This is the, what's it called? Tiara Blue Supertunia that I found one of at a garden tent on clearance. New for 2025, so I get to preview. So that's fun. And then I bought a couple 4-packs, or 99 cents each, just this basic salvia, salmon salvia I've grown. I don't know, that comes in like red, blue, purple, all those colors. And so they're pretty spindly looking, but I'm hopeful. There's also a red, Superbina red down there. And then I have 6 other, I don't know what variety they are. We were doing something fun for Employee Appreciation Week at work, and we got to start seeds. So I did some marigolds. That's what those are. And then more marigolds. Even more marigolds. And we've got another container. This has Fireball, the more orange one, and Strawberry Blonde in it. Holy crap, the beans. That's what beans do. They grow like Jack and the Beanstalk. There's a reason that fable exists. These beans grow so fast, so I need to harvest these. It gets like every 2 days, and I get half a gallon or a gallon bag full. Coming through the dill, and then these zinnias started opening. So I think I was right. I think it was the pink one is Zahara Raspberry Ripple, and then the white one is just Zahara Double White, I think. And this is Purple Prince Alternanthera, one of the most bulletproof annuals you can plant. I put that sucker everywhere. Oh, okay. I'm going to pause. We'll be back later. Okay, and we're back with more garden rambling and the loosely formatted mistakes I've made and things I've done right. It's always a learning process. This garden, I was talking about how, I'm trying to remember now, I took a break because the neighbor was sawing up a bunch of logs from a tree, or they took down a whole bunch of branches. So I just never want people to feel like I'm filming them or anything weird like that. So anyway, I took a break and fertilized all my annuals. Texture is another big thing. So planning your garden is important. I've done that well sometimes, and I've done that not so well. This garden is an example of doing that not so well. I kind of was flying by the seat of my pants, as I said before, and just doing what I felt like doing as I created this space. And now there's a plane. Hopefully it's not too audible here on the mic. So I've had to move several things because they weren't tall enough. I've also moved and adjusted several things because of color. You want to have a good mix of color, and that means not just blooms. That means foliage color, because that is what is there all summer. Blooms come and then they fade and then they're done unless you have annuals. But foliage is there all summer. So I've definitely learned that it's important to pick out plants that have nice foliage, not just nice blooms. Daylilies are one example. Some people love the foliage. I, for one, am not the biggest fan. When it's nice and fresh in the spring, it comes out beautiful, but halfway through the summer, it just looks messy. So I go in there and pull out the leaves. That's a job that I don't really want to do in the middle of the summer, but the blooms are stunning. So I have planted some things in front of these daylilies because, of course, I planted daylilies in the front of the border. One way to get around that is to plant them with something in front so that it blocks the foliage, or at least distracts from it. So I have 3 sedum here and an arborvitae, Anna's Magic Ball, and these are not dark towers. Oh, I was night embers sedum. So you see those rather than the foliage. Anna's Magic Ball isn't mature yet. But having a mix of texture too, that's something that I've had to adjust for in this garden. It's really easy to get a lot of green foliage when really you do want, I know Laura on Garden Answer says it, but it's not just her or her mom that came up with that. Like, it's just a fact, I guess, to have a mix of color, a cool tone like a blue or silver, white foliage I'm talking about, a yellow or chartreuse or bright green like the Anna's Magic Ball is that bright pop of chartreuse, that kind of bright gold, red or purple rather, I guess, either or. That's what the sedum is, and the hibiscus I was missing. It was all green back there. It was just all green, all finer textured foliage. You've got the coreopsis there with that fine leaf texture, and then right next to the aster also fine textured leaves, and then the grass behind it. And that was roughly where I had that sedum, is where the Holy Grail hibiscus is now. So I needed a bolder texture foliage, just has much bigger, bolder leaves, and something red to pop against the green. Could have done something quote unquote blue or silver too, but I didn't want to do an evergreen. And I have kind of a blue tone in the grass. Man, that grass is happy this year. It is so tall. I'm just amazed at how tall that is. That, by the way, is the Shenandoah switchgrass, panicum. Anyway, so that's one thing: blue, green, gold, and red. And I'm still kind of working on it back here. Over here, I have a lot of fine textured foliage. Now, since I moved that hosta, which is getting burned, but once this brand new evergreen gets taller, it will shield the hosta from the harshest part of the sun. That's a nice bold texture. A big leaf is what I'm talking about when I say bold texture. Even these two have different texture. You know, this has more of a long, skinny leaf versus more of a rounded leaf, I guess. But this area, I'm still working on it. This purple now is more visible to get that red color in there, because this plant has gotten a lot taller. Before the last couple years, it was so short you could barely see it. And now I'm trying to add some of that blue or silver kind of color. So I have this Troutman juniper that I just planted this year. But this area is definitely a work in progress. And like I said, I mean, it was kind of fun to just plant whatever the heck I felt like planting as I went and not have an ultimate plan. But now I'm going back and revising a bunch of stuff. So, but that's also part of the fun of gardening too sometimes. And sometimes you just have to see it to have the vision, I guess. So, my Weigella is reblooming. Sometimes Weigella do that. Not as covered in blooms as the first time around, but we get that beautiful sort of bright fuchsia pink. I really need to cut back this lily. That's the oriental lily that's all chewed up by beetles and done blooming now. And then this, gosh, it's so bright I can't see my viewfinder very well, but right in front of this juniper, that is a gomphrena. Kind of cool. I haven't planted that variety before, but it has that lighter kind of gold leaf. What's that one called? Solar Flare, I think. And then reblooming on my rose here. And I haven't had, I mean, I've only had this rose for a few years now. Haven't really had huge Japanese beetle issues. I know they're attracted to roses. I do see a few. I am going to get out a bucket of soapy water and come pick them off, because I am seeing some beetles on them now. Like there's one just, is it conked out in the middle of that flower, or is it eating? There are a few in here. So you want to get them early. One thing that I have read is that when they find something they like, they emit a pheromone as they're eating that will attract more beetles. So that's how it seems like you end up with, like, they're just going after one plant and like skeletonizing one thing, and they're all over it. And evidently that's how that happens. So I need to get rid of those. Goldenrod starting to open, dwarf goldenrod. At least 2 of those are little lemon, Solidago. There was a third that I bought without any tag on it that looked just like little lemon, so I purchased it. I don't know what it is. If it's not that, then I have no clue. But I love that bright yellow flower. And then it has cool texture, like the pollinators love it. Goldenrod is a native. Of course, this dwarf version is a cultivar of the native plant, but pollinators absolutely go crazy for it, and the seed heads look really neat after it's done blooming too, I think anyways. This is the Atomic Purple Gomphrena, which I've also, first time growing that, started that from seed too. And I really like that kind of white center on the purple, and it has a nice, like, bushy but still fairly compact habit so far, which I'm enjoying. And the more blooms on the Sunseeker's Salmon Echinacea. Really nice. I'm trying to take my own advice and leave space. So this is also something I learned as I've tried to not make the mistake of crowding my plants too close. You know, you plant a bunch of perennials and you have a whole lot of open space until they fill in, which is sometimes hard to deal with, and sometimes why we crowd our things and plant them a little too close. It's because we don't like seeing that open space, or it looks like that's too much, they're too far apart before they mature, and it takes a few years to mature. So I actually take advantage of that and plant annuals in between in the meantime to add in that color. That's what I do. A lot of my things that I start from seed, I plant in the ground rather than containers. So I've got snapdragons back there. Those actually keep, well, you can't hardly see them right now. Okay, so behind the sedum I have snapdragons that continue they sprout from the roots. Now you can't see them, but that was how I filled in space. I knew I wanted to plant, you can use annuals to fill in space while you decide what you want to plant as well as you're planting. So before I planted anything where that hosta is, I kind of stopped, slowed down and said, you know, I need to plan out my space a little bit more. I need to find the right plant instead of just throwing something in there and crowding it or having it not jive with everything else. So I did annuals just in that spot for a few years. Cannas, I always have extra tubers from my own that I save every year. I did Holy Grail hibiscus. I even did a Tithonia, which was really cool and huge. That thing got massive, but then it tipped over at the end of the summer in a big storm. So this area has been revised quite a bit because I did not plan quite so well. This side, however, I started with a plan, and I have had to do very little revision in this space, so it has really worked out. I knew I didn't want to plant like a big solid arborvitae hedge or anything like that, like solid hedging. I just wanted a little bit of a privacy screen. Just, I think, both us and the neighbors, and then just a backdrop to look at. Sitting on the patio or from the house, you're looking straight out here. It's nice to have a pretty garden to look at. So I actually sat down and sort of planned this out roughly. I was inspired by shopping Gerton's clearance section, and I knew I wanted to start a garden here, but I found these viburnum. There are 2 of them left. I had 3 originally, but I found all of these shrubs in clearance at Gerton's, and that's kind of what started my plan. But I took my time also. And I noticed I used a lot of garden planners online for inspiration, or you can find like blueprints for garden spaces too that just sort of give you ideas. And planting things in 3s in triangular shapes is what I see a lot. So that is kind of what I did here. And I definitely wanted a mix of different color foliage. So I found these 3 viburnum and I planted them in a triangle. Boop, boop, boop. And I found this, I knew I wanted an evergreen too. And I found this North Pole arborvitae that's back there for $10. And then I knew I needed something variegated in between, hopefully with some winter interest. So I was waiting for one of the variegated dogwoods. Found that on clearance for $5. Finally, And then I also happened to find all these echinacea. So I was kind of in a hurry to get this planted before the summer was over that year. But I started with the foundation, which is the shrubs. That's the backdrop. Those are the things that are going to get the biggest. And that's how the bones, I guess, of this garden bed are the shrubs. Oh, and then the 3 barberry too. I did the same thing where I planted in a triangle. So boop, boop, boop. You don't need to plant everything in 3s. You can have a specimen, like the North Pole Arb is sort of a specimen in that position. Some things I planted in 3s. I rarely do though, like a patch of coneflower. You can't tell how many plants are in there once they fill in and once they all grow together. But having a punctuation throughout the space helps to organize it. And you can certainly plant 1 of something or 2 of something. I do that quite often. But if you have a large garden bed like that, having your foundation shrubs look organized and intentional, and then having certain things planted in tidy groupings just makes the whole space, I think, come together. Like these, the firelight hydrangeas, I only have 2 of those. And I'm certainly no expert. I have not studied this. I have just found inspiration online and from other gardeners, from watching other gardening channels, and just from trying things out myself, trial and error. So I'd say this garden I did right. Kind of got lucky with the sun conditions when the trees were here, knowing what was going to work in the shade and where my sun began, which is how I have this blue hosta right next to a patch of echinacea. It's sort of the line of the shade from when the trees were here. Although now things are full enough that this does get some shade during the sunniest part of the day. These Millennium Allium also, there's 4 of them here. You don't have to buy in odd numbers. There's no reason to do that. Just have a few spots. You can have randomness, but have a few spots where you have a little cluster. Like here I've got 1, 2, 3, again in a triangle. And you can do a drift, kind of the allium are more of a drift. Otherwise just do a triangle, a punctuation, that works pretty well. Or a border. Lining things with a border makes them look tidy too, I've found. So anyway, just my thoughts. What I think I've done right and what I think I've goofed up on, but nothing's permanent. So that's good. Helenium here. Look at that. It's so pretty. They just look, I don't know, somehow they look like smiley faces, even though they're not. I guess they look more like hats in reality, but they just, it seems like the plant is smiling at me. I just love this one. All the bees are all over it too, the little teeny bees. Love it. And this poor Nemesia, I cut this all back. Last year, the same line performed like a champ in drought. This year it's struggling, but it's still plenty alive, so we shall see. And the Millennium are just about to burst open. And those are some of the most covered in pollinator flowers in the garden. They're amazing. This hydrangea has split open a little bit. I'll probably have to prune it a little bit harder next year. We got so much rain. This one is standing up nice and tall still, but this one really started flopping from all the rain. I could cut some of the lower blossoms too, cut some of the blooms off, and that'll help it pop back up if I get around to it. And then the little lime over here has started opening as well. Huge blooms on these. Look at the size of that. Gigantic. I love when they open. They're that like bright lime green, hence the name. So pretty, and those start turning pink too, but a lighter pink than the firelights. The firelights turn like a really deep raspberry versus the little lime and the limelight turn a little bit lighter pink when they start to go. So pretty. And I look at these poor plants over here, all this water that we got. At least I think that's it, because there are multiple varieties that are suffering, but my poor heucherella, oh gosh, and those are so beautiful when they're full. I'm not going to dig anything up. I'm hoping they'll come, even if they die back completely this year. I'm still going to wait till next spring and see if they come back up. This Brunnera is just, there's like one leaf that's dying back. Poor thing. That one's not looking its best, but it's hanging on still. Raspberry splash lungwort looks a little stressed too, although that kind of was weird when it emerged. But other things are looking great. This Jacob's ladder is absolutely beautiful. Just bright white foliage variegation there. We've got a crested surf fern right behind it. A hellebore of some kind. This Brunnera too this was just planted in the fall. It's a looking glass, but also not looking so super. And then this hosta designer jeans looking, blooming. If I cut out the damaged leaves, it would look a lot better. This viburnum is doing great. It's the first year it's really actually grown and done something, and I do have berries, so it must have gotten pollinated from something, because there are berries all over where it was flowering, so yay for that. And then we've got behind it now kind of done with blooming, but the light pink razzle dazzle astilbe. I wonder if this viburnum crosses with the Bailey's cranberry variety that I have over on the other side. And then this fern is called Lady in Red. Can't really see it. I'm not going to climb over again, but the stems are kind of reddish colored. And this is just marvelous. This is the Sun King Aurelia. I think this one's been in there for 4 years now. Here are a couple more heuchera that are struggling. These were just champs last year. But this one is Berry Smoothie, and so is that one. That one's looking okay. That one looks like it's on its deathbed. And this was a mystery hosta that looked like Berry Smoothie but wasn't. I don't know if that'll, not hosta, heuchera. And then a volunteer squash plant that I kind of forgot about, meant to pull up. I should pull it. It's self-seeded there, but way too late to actually grow any squash. It's tiny, so. Sage leaf willow looks really good this year. That's made a good recovery, and it's actually full of leaves instead of like last year when it looked super barren. And then we've got the classic limelight in the back. I do need to cut back this yarrow. It is done blooming, but you can kind of see there's a whole bunch of fresh foliage popping up out of the base of it. So I'll cut back those spent blooms. I wouldn't mind the seed heads, except that the foliage gets all yellowed and dead looking, so it looks kind of ratty. But I did plant 2 strawberry drop coleus that I got on clearance in the ground, and then 1 Swedish ivy, plectranthus, that I also got on clearance. This is finally starting to bloom a little bit. This is a rockin' purple, I think, if I remember right. Fuchsia. Rockin' fuchsia salvia for proven winners. And then this is the Walker's Low Nepeta. You can see it throws out a few blooms. Doesn't get nearly as huge as it is in the fall, but it just stays more tidy after you chop it back. So, yeah. I do love, as opposed to daylily foliage, I love the iris foliage. I could clean it up some more, but it just doesn't get so ratty looking as the daylilies do. That also likes a lot of moisture. And garden's looking good. This is the strawberry blonde marigold, also over here, and you can see how it gets kind of those orangey tones. But then, like I said, when it cools down in the fall, it gets real reddish. And I did cut back. This is the Noblessa yarrow. I've been kind of coming here and just shearing off the browning blooms, and it's just sending up fresh bloom shoots all over the place. I've been kind of slowly cutting that one back. I love the texture. That it got a lot bigger than I expected. Actually, a lot bigger than the tag said. Again, perfect example. But it is a cultivar of a native plant to much of the US and North America. So I should have expected it. But I love it, even though it's the front of the border. That bright pop of white blooms, and then all the other blooms around it are so much bigger. They're so cute little petite bloom. So I think it makes a nice contrast to the other plants around it. So that is where it's going to stay. I just need to figure out a better support system. So be warned, if you plant this, or Peter Cottontail is another variety of this type of yarrow, you'll probably want to get some supports to keep it standing upright. Even in years when we have drought, it kind of flops open a little bit. But to me, it is worth it to have. And this is the rebloom on the opening act phlox. And I still can't keep them straight. Romance, maybe, romance pink. But it's just so full of color. And the ones up front are also the white pinkadot, like the white ones with the pink. Also just sort of reblooming like that. What an amazing plant. And this is Limelight Prime. Got transplanted early in July or maybe late June. And it's only a couple years old. It has grown very speedy, but it should be pretty comparable to the Firelights back there once it is mature. And I'm sure next year I won't have to move it or anything like that. So hopefully it'll really start coming into its own next year. Still looks beautiful though for getting transplanted and being a newer plant. And I have a couple things to plant here. I have this coleus I got on clearance just to beef up this patch a little bit. Got another of those Play in the Blues salvia. They're just so amazing. I think if we had drier weather, it might have gotten, that one I planted might be a little bit bigger by now, because they do get enormous. But I kind of planted that a little bit late too. And the chokeberry, let's see if I can zoom in, those black berries. That's when it flowers, it'll get those black berries all over it, and birds and everything eat them. They are edible to humans too. They're not toxic, but apparently they taste terrible, hence the name chokeberry. So I shall be leaving them for the critters. So, but yeah, that's my update. And maybe useful information, I don't know. Hopefully you liked it. I did plant another Bermuda beech over here. I'm going to plant more of those next year, because that one I have in the container is just an absolute champ. What a nice, I hope I can find it next year, because I really want to plant that again. All right, well, I will leave you with that. Thanks again so much for listening to me ramble on about gardening, my favorite topic. And share some of the things I've learned, I suppose, through trial and error of my own. Have a great day. Please subscribe.